going from Indy Ball 101. We've already got some catching up to do. So let's take a look at what's been going on in the big four Indy leagues so far this offseason. We'll be keeping this pretty brief. There's a lot. There's always a lot going on. There's 7 leagues. There's 78 teams, but we'll keep this pretty brief. We'll paint with broad strokes because we have plenty of offseason left. Your boy needs some content in the future. And we got episodes so we can really devote to how Pioneer League rosters are coming along and how the Frontier League, transactions or front office juggling will affect things. But for now, let's just go over things, get up to speed a little bit. It won't really go in too much into things like the league reviews and previews we'll do and the projections we'll discuss for players and teams. We'll start with the Atlantic League. The Atlantic League playoffs ended with the Lancaster Barnstormers completing a strong second half push with their 3rd league title and their first since 2014. The Legends' Courtney Hawkins won Player of the Year for the Atlantic League, as well as all of Indy Ball, according to Baseball America. He is now heading to Japan for 2023. Good for you, big man. Meanwhile, Daryl Thompson took home his 2nd consecutive Pitcher of the Year award for the Southern Maryland Blue Crabs, and that's obvious. He's gross. Go check out Daryl Thompson. If you're anywhere remotely near a Southern Maryland Blue Crabs game, you can line it up. Go see Daryl. You got to do it while you still can. The man's graying. Doesn't matter. He'll pitch till he's 75 because the disgustingness that comes from his hand is blessed by God, and we're blessed by God to be seeing that. You feel me? That's between us and the Lord why Daryl Thompson's hanging out with us, but he's doing it, and that's good for you and me. Shortly after the season, the Lexington Legends were sold, and the one-year Wild Health Genomes, who were playing in that same ballpark as the Legends, would be officially folded in favor of a Frederick, Maryland team that will share a ballpark with the Draft League's Frederick Keys. Now, this is going to be the final year for this shuffling, which has sort of happened in the Atlantic League while they wait for Hagerstown, Maryland to have a new ballpark built so that they can put their 10th team into that ballpark. Though there are rumors that Frederick may be considering an Atlantic League move on a more permanent basis, which is interesting to track for a few reasons. One, it would then require likely further Atlantic League expansion unless a team is leaving the Atlantic League. Got to have an even number of teams. But also interesting because I haven't seen a ton of excitement in Frederick, Maryland and around Frederick and around the organization for this Atlantic League team to come in, which is fascinating. That could be a marketing strategy. That could be doing a delayed run and an announcement for that. But so we're not going to judge too harshly at this point, but it is something to keep an eye on because there wasn't a lot of excitement in Lexington for the Genomes, and that was a bit of a train wreck. If you followed ALPB Roundup last year, y'all know what's up. If not, we'll talk on it another day. Looking elsewhere around the league, well, I guess in Lexington, really, because they did have 2 managers managing 2 teams, and now there's a shakeup. So the Legends manager, PJ Phillips, is heading to the Frontier League's New Jersey Jackals, while the Genomes manager, Mark Minakazi, is on the move to a yet-to-be-announced destination. Elsewhere, Rick Forney replaces longtime York manager Mark Mason as Barry Lyons grabs the Lexington managing job that was vacated by PJ. In the American Association, since Fargo-Moorhead clinched their first league title over Milwaukee in walk-off fashion, the league has announced that they will be adding a pitch clock for 2023, something the Frontier League and Pioneer League will do also. The Lincoln Salt Dogs have brought in Shane Tritz as their new GM. The Winnipeg Gold Eyes made a splash for bringing Greg Taggart. Taggart, he's already spent 16 years with the Gary South Shore Railcats. That included 3 league titles, one of which was the 2013 American Association Championship. So they're bringing in a vet who knows his business to the team in Winnipeg. He takes over Rick Forney, who left for that York job that was vacated by Mark Mason. In the Frontier League, the Quebec Quebec. Sorry, dude, French? What are we doing? What are we doing? Don't get me started on the Trois Rivières situation. It's not going to be pretty anytime I decide how I'm going to pronounce it, all right? So if we're in the French Canada situation, just buckle up. You're going to be mad. Leave a comment. It's okay. It's okay. Hey, you and I, you can just not like it. It's okay. And maybe you'll get it right eventually. But whether I can go to Canada is already a little up in the air because your boy likes to have a good time. And so it doesn't really affect me much. So oops. But yeah, until, of course, Quebec, is the best team in the Frontier League. That's tough. This is a whole sidebar. We probably shouldn't have gotten into it, episode 1. Regardless, they finished a wild ride. Quebec did. Quebec. I'll give you that. Quebec. All right. They finished a wild ride that began way back in 2019 when they had an uncharacteristically bad final year in the Can-Am League. They didn't finish well. They're typically a very good team. Wheels kind of fell off. Injuries happened. Just things didn't come together. But they did score a top draft pick out of that, which is good for them. And they moved into the Frontier League like the rest of the Can-Am did. After not playing in 2020 and then playing sort of half of 2021, they played as Quebec. Quebec. Which half the season they had to be a travel team because of regulations with the Canadians. The team returned with a vengeance and grabbed the Frontier League title back in 2022. It was a very long, extended, like sort of rebuild slash a full build. It was a very... It's hard to even call it a rebuild when you almost have to strip down and restart the team in many ways. So it was a very impressive job. I had the chance to meet Quebec GM Patrick Scalabrini at a Black Sox event, Canadian baseball guy through and through. That Black Sox, anything Black Sox, that's something we'll talk more on down the road because it's a fascinating piece of Indy Ball. The real Indy Ball of Indy Ball. I love it. I think Joe Torre, not the Joe Torre you're thinking of, unless you are thinking of that Joe Torre, in which case I should be doing this video in probably a car live like he does. He's someone I want to have on down the road as a guest, but it was enlightening to hear from Pat Scalabrini just how they used the lockdown years effectively, how quick the turnaround had to be so they could defend their 2022 title in 2023. Frontier League has very interesting roster rules where guys can, in many ways, not literally, but essentially age out of the league in certain situations. So it's constantly shuffling and figuring out, okay, how do I rebuild this roster in a way that can legally, within league rules, come back next year? So it's been fascinating to see what they're doing. The league's pitcher of the year from Quebec, Miguel Cienfuegos, great name, and MVP Tri-Cities Brantley Bell were both signed by the San Diego Padres last year. They went on a little shopping trip for themselves, or last month, rather. Last year, too, count it. There's been a lot of movement of managers in the Frontier League. The Florence, we'll just go into all. We'll sort of do it list style, right? The Florence Y'alls replaced manager Brian White with former pitching coach Chad Rose. Chad's the dude. He's got a mustache. I like that vibe for Florence. The Lake Erie Crushers named Jared Lemieux as their new manager and director of baseball ops. The Windy City Thunderbolts named longtime MLB vet Richie Sexson, that big sexy from the Northwest, who is still talked about in Wilmington, Delaware, for where I used to work, for how he took over the 1995 Carolina League Championship Series for the Kinston Indians, RIP Kinston Indians, against the Blue Rocks as their new 2023 manager. Man, daggered that championship series, absolutely ripped it out. The Blue Rocks had a nasty pitching staff. Sexton didn't care whatsoever. Now they're putting him in a pitcher-friendly park, so it might be a little bit pitcher-friendly situations is not something he's a stranger to based on that championship series. I think Richie might have an interesting challenge in front of him with the Thunderbolts, but I'd like to see what he's going to do. As I mentioned previously, PJ Phillips is the new manager of the New Jersey Jackals, the 2021 Atlantic League champion manager in his first season in the Atlantic League. It'll be interesting to see how he does. I believe he also won in his first year. He was a player manager with nope. I always forget the name. The V team. Pacific Association. Don't blame me. They're not around anymore. I can tell. Visalia did the thing. He was managing them back in the Pacific Association his very first season as manager. So we'll see if he goes 3 for 3 in first seasons in leagues managing, winning championships. That's something to watch. The Sussex County Miners named Chris Widger as their new manager. His former manager Bobby Jones will now run baseball operations for both the Jackals and Miners. That's something to watch moving forward. And the forever traveling Empire State Rays, speaking of things we need to watch moving forward, I think a lot of people, both inside and outside of the Frontier League, were a little bit surprised that they're returning after a historically poor 2022. They won less than 10 games. They will now be led by former York Revolution manager Mark Mason. That's something we'll follow because he is certainly a manager with a strong resume, but boy, was that team dreadful last year. So we'll see what Mark can put together. It's a lot of bus trips for you aboard Mark. Something else to keep an eye on is the Jackals move into the currently being renovated historic Hinchcliffe Stadium. Tons of money being put into it. Former Negro League Park. Very, very cool situation. Throwback shape. It's got that Polo Grounds feel to it, sort of in the way you got to align the field to make sure you can play some ball in it. That has the potential to be very cool, very historic, very important for the culture and society around there. But there are plenty of red flags, including the design of the place as a multi-use facility in the city of Patterson, where the ballpark is located. Moving on from all the changes within the Frontier League, let's talk about the Pioneer League, who just completed their second Indy Ball campaign after being cut loose from affiliation during the pandemic. Other than re-signings and picked up contract options, there's not too much that's happened since the Grand Junction Rockies knocked off the Missoula Paddleheads to win the championship last September. Glancing at the headlines here, the Rockies, they've finally rebranded to the Grand Junction Jackalopes, which is one of my favorite new logo sets in the indie leagues. Go check it out if you can give it a shot. You can find it anywhere, website, social media, whatever. The Rockies name, that held on longer than I think many of us expected after they were no longer affiliated with the Colorado Rockies, which is kind of a weird vibe, but I'm glad they took the time, got this Jackalope set up right. It looks pretty good. Beyond that, Missoula's Big Moose at first, Jason Newman, he was named MVP, while the Billings Mustangs starter Elijah Gill claimed the league's Pitcher of the Year title. Also noteworthy, Billings' longtime GM Gary Roller retired from his role with the club. Glancing at the group of three, as I guess I'm calling them for now, I'm still deciding how I want to land on that. There's not a ton to discuss, but as a reminder, in the United Shores League, the Birmingham Bloomfield Beavers pulled off a slight upset of those Utica Unicorns to claim the 2022 title. In the Empire League, it was the Tupper Lake River Pigs beating the Plattsburgh Thunderbirds to win the championship, and the league announced that their new team in Malone, New York, would be named the Malone Borderhounds. Solid name, kind of like the vibe. Logo seems chillin'. Finally, in the Pecos League, the Roswell Invaders won the league title over the Tucson Saguaros for their fourth title in 12 years. As far as what to expect for the rest of the offseason, transactions for all leagues.
I may not have a lot, but I love what I got. A 4x4 and a good fishing spot. I hope this time my card won't decline.